Good morning, Nathan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I know the viewers won't be able to see it, but I love the background. Beautiful background. He's got these just amazing, gorgeous cannabis nugs just sitting there in all of their beauty. I love cannabis photography. I've been a fan of it. Used to do a little bit myself and do some prints, and I love it. I love it. It's beautiful. God gave us a beautiful plant. We should admire it and use it to its fullest potential. Well, to get right into it a little bit, reading your bio, but you can only read so much, but it's always better to hear from someone. And I'd like everybody else to hear about you. Nathan Johnson, Ph.D., co-founder and CEO of Vern Bioanalytics in Massachusetts. Tell us a little bit of your backstory and about Vern Bioanalytics, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, certainly. Traditionally, I came from the pharmaceutical sector. My previous life, my previous occupation is I was literally hired to help figure out cancer. That's really what the job was. And my role in that job was to analyze vast amounts of data to come up with patterns, figure out how to actually make a difference and cure cancer is really what the company was all about.
Is cancer cured? I literally just read something this morning where the President Biden was saying that cancer is no longer an issue. We cured cancer. It's just the same as a broken arm. It's no big deal.
Oh, that's BS. We have gotten better at being better at treating cancer, but we definitely have not cured cancer by any means of stretch of imagination.
Well, why is that? You would think with everything that we have going on in the technologies that we have, with all the advancements in modern medicine, and then just advancements in, we'll talk about AI. I have a guest coming on later that they're using some AI initiatives in some very unique ways. How have we not taken care of this already?
So actually, my PhD is actually applying AI to biological data. I use that a lot.
All right.
It's because biology is complicated. Imagine 200,000 dimensional space is really what the type of data that I was working with. Yeah, you really can't. We don't think that way. So
yeah, I don't even fathom that. So,
but the reason what the problem with cancer is that you're trying to fix yourself, and the underlying problem is that we get old. Your cells divide every 6 days. As time goes on, things build up. Think of like your car and your oil that goes into your car. You have to change your oil because things ever so slightly need to be fixed. And same thing with your body. So cancer is just a result of that. Cancer, Alzheimer's, a lot of these big complex diseases are all symptoms of us just getting older. The issue with cancer is that you have cells that are not receiving the right signals to do their job appropriately. And so a tumor is essentially a bunch of cells that have decided just to make more of themselves and not take the clue from the rest of the body and just shut down. And so they're just incapable of taking those signals, and they just keep making tumors over and over again and just overproduce. But there's 1,000 different mechanisms on how that happens, which is why cancer is just a universal term for that. But it's actually by tissue, by cell type, by region is all slightly different, which is why it's a little bit difficult to fix.
Because you said by age, but then there's cases of kids getting cancer and stuff too, and so then so this is completely probably wrong the way that I'm going to ask, but you said that it's the cells not talking. So cannabis, one reported effect of cannabis is that actually helps our cells communicate better. Is that why cannabis has been proven effective in helping treat some forms of cancer?
That study that you're referencing, Israel puts out a lot of these good cancer studies with cannabis, is actually one of the reasons why I came to the cannabis industry. There is one thing that people seem to give a lot of slack to pharmaceutical scientists is that they think it's all about the money. Most of the scientists that are at these companies are there because they're trying to make a difference. It's just the brutal challenge of spending 5 years just to get 2% improvement is a really hard pill to swallow, for lack of a better word. And the reason why we developed Vern Bio is to actually get back to that same problem, which is cancer, as well as solve these complex diseases using cannabis. But the reason why we made Vern is that if you don't have a healthy plant, if you don't know what the plant is doing, how in the world are you going to be able to solve something as complicated as cancer when you can't even understand what tools you're using? And so, because if you look at those same studies with cannabis, sometimes it makes it better, but sometimes it actually makes it worse, or sometimes it does nothing.
Right.
So if you don't have the understanding of cannabis, how do you actually know how to effectively use it to do those things? And so Vern is just one company of multiple that I'm trying to work with to help actually make this a reality. The problem though is I have a great appreciation on how complex cancer is, and I also have a great appreciation on how complex cannabis is. And when you have two things that are both really, really complicated and you're just hoping that this by random luck it works out, I just don't believe that. It's science. Most of the time, it doesn't work. So if you don't know what to do, you're going to have a hard time trying to fix it, and that's going to equate into money as well as timeline.
I could only imagine how almost monotonous the process must be because, like you said, two very complex things. I understand from my own limited knowledge of cannabis, over 160 known cannabinoids. And then how does each one relate, especially when combined with other cannabinoids? I understand that as well. Some cannabinoids do an effect on their own, but when combined in certain ratios with other ones, they do different effects. And then trying to use that and treat cancer is that's why I'm not a scientist. Now, you said something that I actually haven't heard, and I would love it if you would expand on it for a brief moment. You said that cannabis, in these studies has been proven to yes be effective, which I've seen that and I've heard of that. I've actually seen it in my own life, not me personally, but people that I know. You said that it's been shown where it doesn't really have any effect. I've seen that as well. But you said that sometimes it can be an antagonist and actually make it worse. I've never heard or seen of that. Could you expound on that?
Because of all the combination of cannabinoids and honestly terpenes, and also other things that are in the plant, like proteins that could also have an effect, those all of them can bind to your cell receptors to different degrees. And when you put something like that on a petri dish, when you have, so literally scientists will use a little plate that has cancer cells growing in them. They'll give them a media that's filled with nutrients so that those cells live. A common method for a scientist to see, are we on to something that could actually have a difference? They'll just literally just throw that into the plate and see what happens to the cancer cells.
Just
And
drip it in.
just drip it in. They'll sometimes put more, they'll put less, they'll combine it with different things. They just want to ask the question, is there a chance here that it could make a difference? Now, you can't get too excited because you can pour bleach in that plate and kill all those plant or all those cells.
Right.
And so obviously you have to be a little bit skeptic of like, okay, it kills it, but how's this going to do to your normal cells?
Right.
And so you want to be very, very cautious about that combination. But the idea is if you put something in there and the tumor cells do something in a way that possibly makes it indicative that they're going to die or not grow or something like that, then that means they're onto something. And so this happens with cannabis, just like any other thing that's out there. You always see the pro, the con, and then you see nothing. So there are some studies or some results that have actually shown that cancer will start growing faster when you put in some cannabis extracts.
Wow.
Now, but the question is why? Like, why does that happen? The one thing that a lot of people will not talk about, and you got to be really realistic about this, is the people that cannabis does wonders for are the ones who are still talking. Those that it didn't work for aren't talking anymore. And so
That's
this is
hard.
why that's the reality is.
It is, yeah.
And I have a biased observation. Like I've seen
Yep.
people who will have a melanoma cancer and they'll put an extract of cannabis on there and it will clear up after a matter of a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But it keeps coming back though. That's the challenge though, is it keeps coming back.
Yep.
So that's the underlying problem there is why.
I so personal story that I have, and I didn't realize what it was until I was an adult. So when I was a kid, from the ages of I want to say 9, I think is when my grandma married him. So my grandfather died when I was 5 years old, and my grandma got remarried years later. I want to say it was like 4 years later, 4 or 5 years later. So it was around 9 or 10. And the man that she got married to, he lived in Colorado. So she moved out there to Colorado and was married to him for a long time. And then they separated. But while she was married to him, when she got married to him, it was known that he had cancer, melanoma cancer, like skin cancer would pop up, and he would get these scabs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was staying with him, I remember as a kid overhearing him talking with like my grandma and like my parents that he had this friend that lived there in Colorado that was a very natural person
Yep.
that had his garden and made this extract that he put on. And it was this black, dark extract that he used to always put on, and it would help it go away. And then I remember that there was this time that this guy, he couldn't get a hold of him for whatever reason for like a 4 to 6 month period. His stuff got really bad. It came back with a vengeance, and he was able to get on stuff. And he was even taking it sublingually. After I get older and I get into cannabis myself, I find out what he's taking. It was probably like a Rick Simpson oil.
Exactly. That's my guess.
Exactly what he was taking. So, and that was back in the early 90s. And then, but you're exactly right. It always came back, and he actually did eventually die from his cancer, but it did prolong his life. I will say that. And when he was able to use it all the time, it helped, but it didn't completely kill it and take it away.
Yep.
So I was reading something the other day, and who better to talk to than you? So for a while, everyone thinks about the endocannabinoid system. And we think about when we intake cannabinoids, we think of two receptors primarily, the CB1 and CB2 receptor. Mm-hmm. But you hinted at it earlier, talking about like the proteins and stuff that are in the plant. And also, I learned something new the other day. The way our body even intakes cannabis and the cannabinoids is through some different protein receptors as well. That kind of changes things the way that you start looking at it and the way that it affects you, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. People will talk about the CB1, CB2 receptor. If you actually look, cancer cells, they have that all upregulated. They actually have receptors to respond to that, but so do lots of other cells in your body. So a lot of people like to use these associations, or they'll take cannabinoids and having like antioxidative effect, and they'll try to claim that is a way for it to actually cure cancer to various degrees and all this different, I would say, bro science to some level. So do blueberries. Blueberries are antioxidants. There's lots of other things out there that do these things, and blueberries don't cure your cancer. Just highlights the fact of your body is wonderfully complicated, and cancer is the fact that your cells are no longer receiving signals to do what they're supposed to do, and they go haywire. And so normally most proteins or most things that are in plants, they don't interact with your cells. They just get broken down and get reused like a garbage, like recycling. They're recycling those amino acids and repurposing them for stuff that is useful for you. Or you can get vitamins from them where you can't make them, so you can reuse it for different purposes. But the bottom line is, I guarantee you that there are hundreds of receptors that are going to be interactive with cannabis, just given the amount of response that you can see from cannabis. I'm not saying it's because it's just only one or two receptors. There's plenty of drugs that are made out there that only affect one or two receptors that do a whole lot of effect. But given the broad-based response on how people respond to these things, it would make a lot more sense if there's a lot more way for the body to interact with it. Yeah.
Now, cannabis being the amazing plant that it is, there's so much in it. Each strain is different and especially nowadays with all the new hybrids that we have. I just say everything's basically a hybrid nowadays because it's been crossed so far from its original mother that, but each strain, I would imagine that in your studies, in the testing and experiments, if you will, that you guys have done, is that some of the things that you're seeing maybe from the difference between a good effect, a negative effect, or no effect is the types of strains? And in your studies, could I maybe ask, what have you identified as maybe some of your more medicinal strains? Or maybe is it indica, is it sativa, is it a specific side of that?
Personally, I hate the word indica, sativa, or hybrid.
Tell us why.
Well, why? Because as a scientist, I want a name to be defined as something that's meaningful. So cannabis indica, cannabis sativa are actually taxonomy names that correlate to something that is indicative of the plant. Those are based on physical features like long leaves versus fat leaves, things of this nature. Those definitions came out hundreds of years ago, before cannabinoids, terpenes, all that were profiled. And that's normal. Botanists, that's what they use. They use those features to define their world. But when DNA sequencing came around, when other tools came around to actually correlate those physical features to the DNA sequence that it is, lots of taxonomy gets changed when that correlation gets done, because phenotype or physical manifestations and genotype or the DNA has a lot more variability in terms of what what's possible. And so indica sativa, while it's a nice hand wave to explain what the plant is doing, it really limits it on what the output of the plant is. And since the output of the plant is cannabinoids, terpenes, and different combinations thereof, that's what you as a user responds to. By you just simply saying it's indica, it really simplifies the whole process in terms of how the farmer grew the plant, where they grew the plant, how they treated it after they extracted it or possibly harvested it, how they cured it. All these different effects have a direct correlation to how you respond to that plant. And so when you say indica or sativa, it's like, okay, you've now narrowed the population of 100 strains down to 50 that all may do different things to you that are wildly different.
Yep.
And so it's nice as a nice way to explain it, but it's not useful to the consumer, in my opinion.
I like that.
So
I like that. I like that opinion. No, one thing I've noticed that a lot of dispensaries are doing finally, and they're doing it in the states that have had programs going for a little bit longer, is they're doing the education past the THC. They're talking about the minor cannabinoids. Some brands even list those minor cannabinoids on their packaging as part of the overall percentage, and everyone's heavy into the terpenes and finally getting into what the terpenes actually do to you. As I like to say, as I like to shop, the nose knows. If you smell something, if you don't even read the label, and if your body engages with it, you're drawn to it. That's probably going to give you the best experience versus if you were shopping looking at the label. Now, if you do shop looking at the label, I always tell people, once you've identified what your nose likes, then look at that. And then don't look at the THC content or nothing, but just look at the terpenes that are in that and look for the ones that are heaviest in that. And that's what your body's needing. Mine, myrcene. It's always been myrcene. That's every strain that is heavy in myrcene I am drawn to, and it does wonders for me for the anti-inflammation for my gut. Helps a lot there for the relaxation and pain relief. But some people, that's too much, and they like the terpene or they like the carotene. They like to be a little bit more up and focused and stuff. So I like that. I like what's your definition, because really, especially like I said at the beginning of the conversation, everything's so crossed so far from the original mother nowadays that the true indica sativa is no longer even a thing.
Right. And if you look at the sequence between both indica and sativa, there is lots of differences, but at the same time, you couldn't identify if it's indica or sativa just from that alone. So there's a lot of extra stuff there that we got to figure out as we go forward.
So how should we label stuff? What do you think?
I would say based on the product output, your cannabinoids and terpenes, because that's ultimately what you care about. The only reason why you want a strain name is it kind of gives you some kind of brand recognition on who is actually making that plant, because that is a huge component to the quality that is produced. So, like for example, the terpene levels that you have, that's a very good indicator, because if they've mishandled the flower at all, those terpenes are going to be gone. And if it's old, and so smelling it, you smell a really good terpene profile. That already gives you an immediate checkbox on its good quality, because they've taken care of the flower. What actually is the type of terpene? What is the actual cannabinoid, and what's the combination thereof? That's what gives you your effect of who you are. Because beyond that, and that's 1% of what the plant is giving you. All the cannabinoids and terpenes that we profile are a fraction of what the plant is doing. But at least gives you a different metric on what the effect will be. Whereas if you just look at THC percent, I mean, there's such a thing as a saturation effect. There's a point where your cell receptors can't actually take anymore.
Yep.
And if you actually keep pounding that, your receptors are going to retract, which means it's going to be harder and harder for your body to respond. So
the saying of "I smoke so much, I smoke myself sober."
Yep, exactly.
That's a real thing.
It's a real thing. Or the people that will smoke several joints a day, if you ask them, like, when you start doing that, they'll say, "Oh, it'll take me months to get to this point, and I have to smoke this much to get to that same effect." But if they do like a type of cleanse, they don't do anything for about 2 or 3 weeks, they'll reset their body essentially.
Yep.
And
it's hard for a medicinal user sometimes, but you can use it in other ways, Yep. But you can still microdose. Like that's what I do for myself. Exactly. I'm a medicinal user. I use it in replacement of several pharmaceuticals and stuff, and it's helped me live a better quality life. But I still take breaks. I don't necessarily take weeks. I'll take a few days here or there, and it'll help me reset. And when I'm doing that, I eat really healthy. I already drink a lot of water, but I'll drink even more and drink like cranberry juice and teas and stuff, and try green teas. Try to cleanse it out a little bit and and then restart. But you're right. You're right. I've been there in the past. Not anymore. Not anymore. Now I'm just strictly, like I said, pretty much just a medicinal user. And then if I am at an event or something, maybe for a little bit socially because I don't drink alcohol. But there was the times that I would be part of just some smoke sessions, man. I'm telling you, just burning the house down. And you get that point where you just pounded those receptors all night. Now you're just like, okay, well, I'm sober now, so we're good to go. Let's go eat. I'm hungry. Need the food. And then you get the food high. So Vern Bioanalytics,
Mm-hmm.
what are you guys doing differently? First of all, in the testing space of cannabis, let's say cannabis and hemp as a whole, because I do have experience on the hemp side. I have experience on both, and right now actively involved on the hemp side with testing and stuff with the hemp brand that I run operations for in Delta Space. And that has its own whole can of worms that we won't even get into. It just needs some help in the regulatory. Doesn't need to be banned, just needs regulated the same way that we did with cannabis. But even in cannabis, there's still some discrepancies. You go read a label. The sad thing is you can't always believe that, even at a dispensary.
Yep.
What the heck?
It's like,
Like,
yep.
how is Vern? What are you guys doing differently? And what do you guys think of that? And how are you trying to change it?
Great questions. I love the lineup. So first things first, we focus on plant health. So we focus on mold, mildews, viruses, viroid that affects the plant. So the picture you see behind me, there's actually a hopslet and viroid in the plant on my right or left, and the plant on the other side is not. So you can see the frost level or the
Hmm.
trichome level is quite drastically different between both of
Yes.
those buds. And that is as due to hopslet and viroid. That's due to one of the biggest epidemics that's happening in cannabis that's ruining a bunch of those trichomes in this example. But there is on the order of 60 plus pathogens that actually can all affect the health of the plant. So just like people, plants get sick. And if your plant gets sick, they don't produce as well. And so our role as a company is that we do lots of testing both nationwide and internationally for these things. And then on the other side, people have microbial failures for various reasons. We come in and help them fix it, provide some sort of surveillance to make sure that everything stays healthy. So that way they get a warning before they get to the production phase. Because a lot of the things that we do, we test at the clone, the seed, at the vegetative stage, because at that point you can do something about it. If it's in the flower, the damage has already been done. And so we focus on that plant health to make
You're
sure
looking at the genetics of the plant,
we're looking at the
like what it
genetics, looking
carries
at
on
it,
from.
what it has, like is it infected is essentially what we ask for in
So
the
wait,
lab.
plants can carry on basically cancers. They can carry on genetic issues from the mother, like
Oh yeah,
just like
it's all
humans, huh?
biology. Yeah. So like the flu that you get,
Yeah.
plants have different types of flus that they get sick from. That they don't sneeze and cough like we do, but they're going to be droopy or wrinkly or show yellow indication or things that could be attributed to nutrient deficiency. But it can also be virus based. And because of how cannabis is grown, it actually is quite pervasive.
Is there hereditary sicknesses?
It can be because
Wow.
viruses can pass through seed. So
Wow.
it can pass by insects, it can pass by touch, it can pass by your pruners or your clippers, it can pass in your environment. So there's lots of ways that these things can get passed around, and that's why we exist to help mitigate that damage.
And so second part was what is so that's what you're doing to help mitigate it. So obviously
Mhm.
I'll take from that you guys don't like what is going on in the market and you're trying to prevent some of these things. You're trying to prevent it from the
Yeah,
beginning though.
the market. I mean, it's not surprising when you have the cultivator making a decision on which lab to go to. Of course, there's
Yeah.
going to be some bias from both sides
Yeah.
because the lab is financially motivated to give you whatever answer you want. So,
Yep.
and because of that, the label is not going to represent what it should represent.
Hmm.
But on the flip side, it also is due to the fact that all techniques in science have some level of bias or some level of insight that they give, And when you have, say, 20 labs in Massachusetts all using 20 different methods to quantify THC, of course there's going to be difference.
That's it.
So that's another problem. The last problem is also stability. That THC percent that they gave you from that batch 6 months ago, is it going to be the same results now? Of course not. And so that's the other effect of is the numbers are going to be slightly different depending on different ways of controlling it. So it's slowly getting better. I would say one of the best fixes are going to be labs that do third party checkups on other labs to make sure that they're doing well. A government lab would probably be a better one because they're not financially motivated to give the answer. They just give the answer. So they don't care what the result is. And then they can just do like your shopping in the lab or not the lab in the dispensary to see if the label actually matches the product, things of that nature. But it'll be a slow fix as time goes on, but it's getting better.
Okay. Now, are you guys involved anywhere else in the States besides Massachusetts as far as with your testing or anything, or are you held to Massachusetts because of state laws and
So for
federal
us,
regulations as well?
we actually have the USDA permits to accept material internationally. Um,
Oh, all right.
so because technically everything that we work with is hemp, no matter what the plant's going to be made, because we
Yep,
don't
yep.
deal with that.
You don't
We
deal with
get
the flower, you
material.
just deal with the
We
seeds and
don't. We just deal
clones.
with everything before flower.
I like it.
And
Thank you,
so we are.
DEA.
That's right. So they ruled that the source law it doesn't apply to this, so it doesn't really matter what the plant's going to do. And honestly, we don't care because we're just testing for viruses and things of that nature. So
That's
we
really
accept material nationwide and internationally.
that's really cool. So where since you deal internationally, where are you seeing a boom happening, man? I mean, we always have the states and we have new states popping up left and right all the time. There's new laws and regulations changing daily. But
Oh yeah.
internationally, where are you seeing the next boom starting?
So Europe was thought to be a really big boom, but then Germany tend to backpedal in terms of their legislation. So that one maybe in the next couple of years as time goes
Yeah,
on, but I would say
yeah.
probably Colombia, Costa Rica, because they have export rules in place, and that's going to make a very interesting relationship with the United States. So
Okay.
the DEA actually, I think it was a couple months ago, allowed the first international shipment of cannabis to come in. It'll be interesting. It will. It's already complicated as it is in terms of each state have their own market.
Yeah.
Trying to lock it in with the rest of the world. It's going to be a wild ride.
What about places like Malta, Spain, South Africa, Thailand?
Yeah, so Thailand, they also backpedal a little bit on their legislation, but
Really?
yeah, they did a little bit, but their government switched. But again,
That's the problem with those countries.
yeah. So those other countries can produce cannabis cheaper than we can.
Hmm.
But the challenge is going to be transportation and quality of goods.
Yeah.
I would argue probably locally sourced, locally grown is going to be a better quality plant and a better quality bud than trying to get it from Africa that took a month to get to you,
Yep. And
or
we still
more.
grow the best. We still grow
So
the best. When I was in Spain, I was in Spain earlier this year. I was in Barcelona,
mhm.
looked up the cannabis clubs, went to one of the best rated ones. It was an awesome little club. It's one of the smaller ones too. It's called Club Guru. But if you're ever there, I recommend going. Their menu is always stacked. It's great. And it's a nice little spot in the Gothic corridor. But anyway, when we went there, we were there for, I want to say it was 4 nights, 5 days. We were in Barcelona. It might have been longer, but anyway, it was a long trip. We did it after a convention. So it was just a blur in time. But anyway, we went there the first part of the week and met the people and smoked some really good heirloom OG strains. Like I got to smoke cat piss from Soma Genetics, Soma seeds for the first time in I want to say almost a decade. It'd been forever. It was really good. And they kept telling us that, hey, come back at the end of the week. We're gonna have something really special. Well, I got there at the end of the week and they're like, hey, we got something special and we got stuff from California. And they pull out these nugs. They pull out the product from, and it's like some. There was a gelato strain, and there was a cookie strain, and it's like, man, this is the stuff that I smoke all the time, living here in Las Vegas. But you know, we still have the best cannabis, at least according to the world standard, from coming out of California. Um, I always say the best flowers from California and Oregon, and the best concentrates are from Colorado. So
Hmm.
that's what I've always in.
Interesting. I'll be curious to
So
see how that works as more states come online.
yeah, no, definitely for sure, definitely for sure. It's been kind of sad, like living here in Nevada. Our program isn't bad. We definitely have some quality out here. There's some quality stuff out here, but it's just few and far between. And the ones that are quality, you are paying an arm and a leg for. I mean, it's just astronomical on the pricing. It's crazy, and it makes it, even on the medical side, it makes it hard. Nice thing that Nevada does do is they accept out of state medical cards and stuff. And so people are able to get that benefit when they come in within the state. But it's still not as accessible as it is in places like Colorado or California, where the prices are a lot lower. And I mean, just for reference, a good quality live resin extract, whether if you're saying in a cartridge or even just a gram of dabbables, we'll say a gram of dabbables, 1 gram in Colorado of really good stuff is going to run you anywhere from, on the low end, maybe 25 to 27. High end, yeah, you're going to pay 45, 50. California was just out there. Low end, 18, 20, high end, maybe 35, 40. But that stuff's crazy, insanely good. But here in Las Vegas, can't even really buy full grams. It's a half gram. And for that half gram live resin concentrate, even for a low quality one, you're paying like $35 to $37 for a half gram, So the price is just so messed up. So I'm very interested to see. I was out in Arizona just a couple of weeks ago. The Arizona market is insanely expensive just to enter. It's like 10 to $15 million just for the piece of paper. And so it's a monopoly out there. And the licenses, they only have like 117 or something dispensaries in the entire state, versus like California has a few thousand, or like Colorado. And the quality of their product, same thing. It's just not very good. The quality is so poor that there are some Delta 8 products that are better quality in terms of testing, in terms of the effects and the taste, because of the stuff that you're using with using actual hemp or cannabis derived terpenes and stuff. But then the actual cannabis market, it's sad.
That's embarrassing.
It's very embarrassing, very embarrassing. So, and you have that same problem going on in places like Florida as well, man. I got good friends that live out in Florida. The Florida cannabis market is so messed up. They're not even recreational, they're medical, and very limited access. And then when you even get the ability to get a card and you go into the dispensary, the access is just not there. You're looking at like maybe 12 SKUs in the entire store. That's across edibles, vapes, and flower, So
Yep.
It's very sad.
Limited cultivation out there too.
Yes. So, yeah. Well, everything out there you grow is going to get some mold.
That's exactly right.
Fight that.
That's why they don't have a mold test out there.
Oh, that is so sad. Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they're yeast and mold for regulation tests. So in Massachusetts and other places, you have a pretty strict standard on that.
Yeah.
In Florida, you don't, because they know that mold is everywhere. The main thing that they require is the aspergillus and some of the other bad ones, but again, they don't require a general mold test because they know it's going to fail. So,
and people wonder why there's still a black market.
Yeah,
because at the end of the day,
surprising to me.
at the end of the day, you can still get some of the best cannabis from these old school growers that know what they're doing. They've been growing for years. They grow their soil, and if you grow your soil, then it grows the plant, and now you get this amazing flower that's very medicinal, high in the terpenes.
Complete control environment too. That's the other thing, is that because it's black market, they have to be much more careful on where they grow and how they grow, and they're not going to be telling your buddy or whoever that they have it. Nope. Which means that it's going to be relatively safe from infection and these other problems because it's completely different environment. So I'm not an advocate for the black market, but I can see the reason why it exists.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And until we get some better laws in place and get some people that actually care about the product, there are the people in cannabis. Thankfully, there are people that actually care about the end user, the patient, and what it does. But there's a lot of people that just came into this from other businesses that wanted a quick buck, or so to speak, or they wanted to be in the new cool enterprise, and they just have that dollar amount at the end of the day, and they do not have the end user in mind. And so then you get products that are harmful to you in more ways than one.
Exactly. Unfortunately.
Well, Nathan, I really appreciate you coming on today and just sharing the immense knowledge that you have. And I'm sure we could go on for probably hours with all the experience that you've had in your life, but thank you for just a little brief glimpse into what you guys do and over there at Vern, and what you guys are tackling and some of the issues that you have tackled, and just education on cannabis in general and how it affects the body. I really appreciate it. Very educational today.
Oh, it's quite my pleasure. And I'll be in Nevada at MJ Biz as I'm a speaker there. So we
Oh,
can
really?
meet in person.
Oh, then
So,
we'll meet in person because I'll be walking around. So it'd be good to meet you in
awesome.
person.
Great.
Awesome, well, have a great day. Talk to you soon.
You too.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.